Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. For a second time in less than a week, Malaysian activists taking part in the humanitarian Global Sumud Flotilla have been intercepted by Israeli forces. 9 Malaysians are believed to be among those detained after their vessels, the Conscience and Umm Saad, were seized in the Mediterranean following their attempt to break the siege on Gaza. Now, as this fast developing situation unfolds, what immediate steps are being taken to ensure the safety and the rights of our detained Malaysians? Joining me on the show now is Luqman Mazlan, who is a legal counsel with the Centre for Human Rights Research and Advocacy Malaysia, better known as CENTHRA. He was part of the team in Turkey who provided legal support for the 23 Malaysian volunteers who were intercepted and detained by Israeli forces last week or earlier this week. Luqman, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time and the work that you do. But maybe you can begin our conversation for those who may not be aware of the details. Fill us in. Can you begin by briefly describing CENTHRA's role in this case and your personal role during the detention and the release process?
Okay, good morning, Melisa. Okay, my name is Luqman. As you mentioned, I'm from the Centre for Human Rights Research and Advocacy Malaysia, CENTHRA. Firstly, thank you for having me on this show. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss on this mission, this important mission, and also the work that CENTHRA has been doing behind the scenes. Okay, and as to my personal role in this mission, there's no personal role actually. It's actually a team effort. All right, we all have our parts to play in the mission. But to begin briefly, CENTHRA is a non-profit organization. Okay, we are an organization based in Malaysia, and our core mission has been to promote human rights, particularly Muslim model of human rights, as well as contributing to the meaningful international human rights debate.
Okay.
And for your information, our involvement in this began well before the interception or the detention of our delegates. Okay. Since 31st August, our legal team has been actively supporting the mission on the ground in both Italy and Tunisia, where they had the participants had their training. Okay, so we were divided in two teams. Right? I was stationed together with my colleague, Mr. Day, in Catania, Italy, and two of my colleagues, Encik Azil and Encik Fahmi, were stationed in Tunisia. So for the initial phase, the training period, our responsibility maybe the first task we had to do was immigration verification. So we assisted in verifying the immigration status of all our delegates. We ensure that they are all cleared to enter Jordan. Okay, why Jordan? Why we selected Jordan? Because due to its nearby location to Israel and the close diplomatic ties with our Malaysian government. So we predicted that upon interception and release, if there's going to be deportation, it's going to be to Jordan. Right. And we also assisted in legal documentation. Okay, we actually CENTHRA is only a small group, part of a larger legal group under the Global Sumud Flotilla, consisting of lawyers from around 44 countries. Okay, so what we do in Italy, we assisted in the drafting of this document called the Power of Attorney. Right, this Power of Attorney is basically a legal document whereby we officially appoint Adalah. Adalah is the legal center for Arab minority rights based in Israel, to represent all the participants in the event of detention, arrest, prosecution, and also deportation. Okay. Other than that, during the initial phase, we give training to the participant, legal training. We also conducted extensive legal research with international legal experts and also the international lawyers. As well as extensive research as to the relevant provision under PCID law.
Luqman, if I may interject here and ask you, so with the case of the 23 Malaysian activists who were intercepted and detained, help me understand, were there any formal criminal charges that were brought against the Malaysian volunteers while they were detained? And I'm wondering, what legal framework was that under? What basis were they held under?
Okay, there is no official legal charges against them under the law of Israel because since the beginning when we gave training to the participant, we reminded them if in the event of interception and prosecution, they will be issued with a document called the immediate release form by the Israeli government. Okay. So if you sign that form, you will be allowed or you will be deported within 72 hours of your detention. So we ensure that all our Malaysian delegates sign those documents. We liaise with other lawyers when they were in detention to ensure that they all signed the documents. So that's why there's no charges against them. They were automatically deported to Turkey.
Right. Can I ask you, is it legal for the Israeli forces to intercept civilian humanitarian vessels in international waters? I mean, what are some of the principal legal questions that are raised by them doing this?
Okay. Before anything, let me state clearly that these participants, particularly our Malaysian delegates, they were never arrested.
Okay.
They were never arrested. They were kidnapped.
Right.
They were kidnapped in international waters by an illegal occupying force.
Yes.
Their vessels were intercepted unlawfully in international waters and were transported illegally back to Israeli territory without any legal justification. So this is a clear violation of international law. So to answer your question, the central legal question upon interception was that whether the blockade was illegal. Okay, so we are of the view that from the very beginning the blockade was illegal, right? Because we've agreed with the GSF legal team that the position that the blockade was unlawful under international law simply because this mission was a peaceful, non-violent humanitarian mission aimed to deliver aid into Gaza and occupied territory, right? So under international law, for example, the San Remo manual, we call it the San Remo manual of armed conflict. Okay, this is a humanitarian, international humanitarian legal document, which is highly persuasive. Okay. Under Article 102 of the San Remo manual, it clearly states that any blockade in international waters, if it is the sole purpose is to starve civilian population or to deny them any essential supply for survival, then it is illegal. So that is number one. Number two is that we also know of the ICJ opinion on July 2024 where it reaffirmed that Israeli occupation on Gaza is illegal, right, and demand nations to uphold international law and also protect the rights of Palestinian people. That is number two, right? Now, thirdly, it is also in clear contravention of the Geneva Convention and its additional protocol, whereby it's clearly stated under Geneva Convention that occupying power is obligated to assist, to facilitate in the delivery of humanitarian aid. Okay? So these civilian vessels, like I mentioned earlier, it's solely for humanitarian purpose. It's non-violent. So there's no legal justification to block the vessel from entering into Gaza.
Right. Luqman, with the 9 Malaysians who have been illegally boarded and abducted, kidnapped, as you used the term earlier, can I ask you where we stand now from what you know in terms of what likely steps is Malaysia likely pursuing, what's likely happening in the next 24 to 48 hours to secure their safe and speedy release?
Okay. In regards to the 9 FFC Freedom Flotilla coalition participants, the Malaysian delegates, CENTHRA is not directly involved at the moment as how we are involved with the Global Sumud Flotilla. However, we are still working closely with Adalah and also with the international lawyers. We are following up closely on this mission. And as the statement of Yang Amat Berhormat Dr. Sri Anwar Ibrahim last night, that Turkey will still assist on ensuring the release of the 9 participants. And I wish to also highlight some of the 9 participants, the Malaysian delegates, they are very experienced. They were involved in past flotilla missions. So I believe they have experience, they know what to do, they know what form to sign in detention. I believe now we are just waiting for diplomatic arrangement, as mentioned by our Prime Minister last night.
Okay, all right.
But if I may add just a little bit, upon their release, I believe we will work closely with them, together with the GSF delegates, for our possible legal actions against Israel after this. Yeah.
In ICC, is that where you might be taking international action?
There are a few options that we are currently looking into. We are exploring. Because when we landed in Turkey, we conducted brief interviews with the delegates. Okay? During our interview, we discovered that there are allegations of abuse and torture. So what we'll do after this is that we'll give the delegates about 1-2 weeks to rest and settle down. And after that, we'll start our investigation process. We'll collect evidence and we'll record their testimony. Probably to file an official complaint to the Human Rights Council. Also, we are considering the ICC option. For your information, we are also working closely with international lawyers from South Africa and France to explore the potential action that can be taken against Israel.
Okay. Luqman, I wish you all the best in your work and thank you so much for helping bring home our Malaysian activists. Thank you.
But you and your team, thank you.
Thank you for speaking with us today. Luqman Mazlan from CENTHRA there. We're going to take a quick break here on Consider This. We'll be back with more on this topic. Stay tuned. Hi, welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. Less than 24 hours after Malaysia celebrated the return of our 23 Global Sumud Flotilla volunteers who were intercepted and kidnapped by Israeli forces, reports have now emerged that there was another interception, this time involving 9 Malaysians aboard the Conscience and Umm Saad. So the question is, how should the international community respond to these recurring interceptions of humanitarian vessels daring to sail against the illegal blockade of Gaza. Joining me now is Professor Dr Adam Leong. He's the director of the Centre for Defence and International Security Studies at the National Defence University of Malaysia. Professor, thank you so much for being on the show with me. Based on what we've seen so far, how this fast-moving developing story is unfolding, how would you summarize the diplomatic efforts that secured the recent return of our 23 Malaysians?
All right. As you can see, Malaysia and Israel do not have diplomatic ties. So in order to communicate and get our people back home, Malaysia worked with other third countries. So from the news, we know it's Turkey and maybe Egypt and other Arab states in the region. So I believe Turkey will have played a great role because Turkey and Israel has a good relationship with each other and they cooperate strategically within the Mediterranean Sea region. So Malaysia has always practiced sort of a neutral foreign policy and non-aligned basis. So we are very close with everybody. So we are not tied up with any great powers from the east, west, all the great power competition and whatnot. And that allows us room for our Malaysian leadership, for our foreign ministry to contact, communicate, and work with many other parties. And that also include non-government organizations, NGOs, civil society organizations. That could be inside Israel. I think there's a legal group that is actually it's a sort of NGO inside Israel, a group of lawyers that is actually looking after the interests of those humanitarian activists that has been arrested. So I suppose we have this direct contacts with other third parties and indirect communication with other interested parties who could at least negotiate or communicate with the Israel officials to release our Malaysians at the earliest time possible. And of course, to ensure that they are not harmed and they are safe and of course well taken care of.
So the same process would likely be repeated with the 9 Malaysians who are currently still been abducted by Israel. What do you think you're watching for, or what do you think Malaysia should prioritize in terms of the diplomatic steps over the next 24 to 48 hours?
Okay, we can see that firstly, the whole purpose of this flotilla sailing to Gaza is to create awareness about the humanitarian crisis going on in Gaza, and it's nothing to do with military or whatnot, it's purely humanitarian. So initially, the Israel has a very sort of firm warnings that those detained will be treated as terrorists. So, but they didn't go through with that. So we know they released the 23 Malaysians and the rest of the activists. A few, I heard, a handful are still held on in detention, and I suppose the firm stance of the Israelis has softened because a couple of days they were saying that once they intercept and detain the current flotillas, which include the 9 Malaysians, they will be promptly deported. In a sense that they realize that they have they have created awareness, and people who are really start to say how they were treated by the Israelis, some has been harshly treated, humiliated, and whatnot. And that kind of messages they realize is getting across the world, and now they soften their stance and say we are going to deport them promptly. So we hope for the best that those detained will be promptly deported. Probably maybe within 24 hours upon detention and whatnot. But I suppose that the whole process of how Malaysia will be in communication, our foreign ministry will be in communication with the Turkish counterpart, with other NGO or civil society organizations in that region to try to get things done, and of course as quickly as possible to get the safe return of the Malaysians back home.
All right. So is it purely almost a kind of G2G back channel conversation, working with civil society organizations to ensure the safe return of the Global Sumud Flotilla activists? Or I'm wondering, can there be more institutional pressure, multilateral pressure via the UN or the OIC or ASEAN regional partners? Can it be used in cases like this? Can the international community come together to pressure Israel to release illegal kidnapping in international waters for humanitarian purposes?
I think the United Nations has stated quite clearly in a lot of statements by the UN that do not treat the humanitarian activists harshly, treat them as peaceful activists and whatnot. And in fact, the UN has done a lot of condemnations about the treatment of Gaza, the ongoing genocide and the humanitarian crisis that's going on in Gaza. So a lot of pressure in terms of statements made by the UN and other international bodies have been given up in the last few months, even the last year or so. But again, as we know, the situation is that Israel tends to disregard this kind of statements or whatnot, or protests, primarily because, as we know, they are also backed up by a great power in the United Nations and the UN Security Council. The only body that can enforce action is also paralyzed by the veto system, right? So because of that, we can see what Israel is doing. They're in a sense, they are quite bold to do what they are able to do today, primarily because they know that the international systems cannot do much enforceable action against them as long as the United Nations Security Council is paralyzed. But the key thing about these actions is that it promotes more awareness about the Gaza issue, the Gaza genocide, and I think it has met its objectives. Right now, everybody knows about all this, and almost every other week there's another flotilla going and whatnot. And I think that Israel also realized that, and now, as I mentioned earlier on, they have softened their message that instead of treating them as terrorists, they'll be probably deported to other countries. They are treating them more like illegal immigrants coming to your country. They detain and deport you back to your whichever country that is willing to receive you. So you can see a slight different way is how they are treating the ongoing attempts by the flotillas to enter Gaza and how to deal with the activists on board.
Prof, can I ask you, are there any concerns about diplomatic efforts not being able to succeed? Are there risks or indicators we should watch out for?
Again, there's always a risk. This is why I'm worried. Even my colleagues also could be a little bit talking and worried about this. As I said, that if there's too many attacks by too many flotillas trying to get into Israel, we do not know how the Israel will respond in the future. Would they continue to do what they are doing now, or they may even take harsher actions against the ships attempting to enter Gaza? And this is where tensions may heat up, and maybe even armed violence may be used against the activists. And this is where we have reached another escalation to a higher level. But at the same time, I can see that if you follow the news, recently, as was yesterday, Hamas again has said they have accepted the peace plan that was promoted by President Trump. So we will see if this really goes through the plan. We may see some declining of violence in Gaza, and hopefully they will open up more entry points for more humanitarian aid to enter Gaza. And then I think from that point onwards, the attention will be shifted to another dimension where how to send more aid inside Gaza through various other openings that may be allowed by the Israelis there. So back to the question about if diplomacy fails, right? You say, then again, Malaysia, again, as I mentioned, we are a neutral country. We work with everybody. So we have good relations with great powers like China, the United States, and even Russia, right? Recently, our Prime Minister have met Putin and so on. So in a sense that we can also talk and communicate to these great powers to try to get, to enable, to ask them, to assist us, to try to get Malaysians out if they are later on that threat. And then diplomacy fails and things get heightened or heated up and whatnot. So we still have other mechanisms where we can work through with to get our Malaysians back home safely. Yeah. That is the beauty of Malaysia's foreign policy, being neutral, being non-aligned. We are friends with everybody, and our Ministry of Foreign Affairs has been doing very, very well in having all this open communication with various bodies, various countries, and of course even informal, as you mentioned, informal backdoor channels of communication. It's all about communications, talking, and network with people that enable things can be done quietly. And what matters is that we want to get our relations back home safely if there's a problem, a crisis hits up or whatnot.
Absolutely. In the minute or so that we have left, I have very little time, but you brought up the Gaza peace talks, and all of this is happening amid those talks. Can I ask you what you're watching out for to indicate whether there might be some progress in a ceasefire, in opening up humanitarian corridors?
I think the first step of the ceasefire, where Hamas has agreed and Israel has also agreed, is that Hamas will release the remaining hostages, and any hostages that has died, their bodies back to Israel, and Israel will release some Palestinian prisoners that have been held by them. And then the Israel forces will withdraw slowly, step by step, to a certain areas. And then from there, I hope that the humanitarian corridor, more corridors can be opened up, and more humanitarian aid can be sent in. And then we will hopefully see some development in the alleviation of the hunger crisis, health crisis is going on in Gaza and so on. Right. So that is my hope. But the only worry is that, as all peace plans, whether it will hold or not. So I'm only worried there will be some fighting or whatnot, erupts and whatnot. Then things, the whole plan may collapse, and then we are back to square one, and the Gazans, the people in Gaza will continue to suffer. Yeah. But let's see what happens in the next few days and what develops, and how these plans will take hold.
Yeah. Prof, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. I really appreciate your insights and sharing some of those analysis with us. I appreciate your time. Professor Dr Adam Leong there from the National Defence University of Malaysia, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.